right, looks like we are live. Hoping you guys can hear me okay. Looks like Sasha's here and Bernd. Great to see you guys. I'm just going to double check, make sure that you can hear me and make sure things are clear here. Hi, Sasha. Let me know if the sound's okay, because I'm always struggling with this, and the picture hopefully is okay too. I had to reset my whole system again this morning, and I had some issues with it, so hopefully we're good. I'm just going to touch something here. All right. Welcome. Great. Thanks, Sasha. Appreciate. All right. So today I want to talk about Anders Zorn and his palette. And how that works, and we're going to add a color to his palette and just see how that goes. Hopefully everything goes smoothly today. Loudness is okay. Excellent. Good. Hi, Ina. Nice to see you. A couple of things I want to mention right now, just before I get into the details here. The Toronto Outdoor Art Fair is something that happens every year in Toronto, and it's the 60th anniversary of this art fair. Normally, we would all be setting up tents and having our artwork down at the City Hall or the Rathaus. If you're, from Europe, you know what the Rathaus is. Anyhow, there's as many as 400, 500 artists sometimes who participate in this. So it's a huge event. It's a massive event. And it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of work. It's usually over like 3 days. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And it's really, really a fantastic thing because you get to see what the other artists are doing. Things are nicely framed, and you can walk around and meet the artist, which is really great. Unfortunately, because of COVID, they couldn't do it outdoors because they had to plan this well ahead of this weekend. And so what they are doing now is doing this online. And you can actually go to, if you were to punch in the Toronto Outdoor Art Fair, or TOAF, you can see this now. There are thousands, literally thousands of different pieces of artwork, and you can check it out. You can put in an artist's name if you know their name, or you can put in price, or you can put in by style. There's also photography there, which is interesting. So I just want to put a plug in for the Toronto Outdoor Art Fair because it's an excellent venue, and again, the 60th anniversary. So it's been running a long time, and it's really looking like a lot of fun. I don't know why this broadcast was deleted on Facebook. That's very strange. Facebook's okay. I don't know why that happened. Anyhow, I'm going to just remove that from Facebook, and here we are on YouTube. And I'm going to say hi to folks that have showed up here. Angelica, great to see you. Brendan, nice to see you. And Andrew. Okay, Andrew Kolb, not Brendan. Okay, nice to see you, Andrew. And thanks for showing up. And again, Barrett and Sasha. So super. Thanks for checking in on me today. So apparently this thing is not going on YouTube. I don't know what I've done wrong there. Sorry, on Facebook. Okay, enough of that. Check out the fair if you have a chance. There's a lot of really inspiring work, and I have 10 pieces in, as do the other artists. Everyone is able to put in 10 pieces, and you can press a button and buy a piece of artwork if you want to. So anyhow, that's my sales pitch for today. Anyone who hasn't seen or hasn't subscribed to this channel and these Friday programs, please do so. I think we're about 100 subscriptions away from having a giveaway, a free giveaway. I want to actually give somebody an original piece of artwork, and we'll do some kind of draw for that. So if you haven't subscribed, please do so. Give me a thumbs up if you like what you are seeing and what you're learning, and pass the link on to other people who you think might be interested. Maybe some young people who can't afford to take art classes but want to learn more about drawing and painting and so on. So, okay, so to Anders Zorn, Anders Zorn. His last name is Zorn. I'm sure a number of you already know who Anders Zorn is. He was an amazing painter, and I won't get into his whole biography because you can look him up online. Essentially, he was famous for artists in particular, I think, because he had such a limited palette. So he used to work with titanium white, and or zinc white, and he used to work with a crimson, or what I'm using is cadmium red today, yellow ochre, and ivory black. And a lot of artists think, well, they shouldn't use black. I think the Impressionists kind of kicked black out the door. But there's a famous story of John Singer Sargent painting along with Monet and borrowing his palette and kind of tossing it back at him after a while, saying, I can't paint with your palette because you don't have black. Sargent used black extensively, but he used it wisely because he added color into his blacks for the most part. I don't think pure black, well, he may have used some pure black as well, but it's not evident when I look at his work. It seems like there are passages that have just a hint of some color in it. He was very much influenced by the Impressionists, of course, and some people will call him an American Impressionist, even though, he originated and he learned everything he learned in Europe for the most part. But anyhow, with this very limited palette, Anders Zorn was able to create some beautiful flesh tones, and also some amazing scenes. His palette was really utilizing the power of values, how light and dark things are. So this is something really important to learn, especially for beginner artists, to know that when you're working on a value system, the values, or how light and dark things are actually more important than color, because color is kind of like the icing on the cake. But if the values are wrong, then something is amiss. And the Impressionists actually broke that rule. The Impressionists used to work with values in the upper register, so higher values, less darks, in some cases no darks at all. And you can see the transition of Monet's lifespan when you look at his earlier work compared to the stuff that he did when he was getting older. So it's really interesting to play with color, but you want to play with it knowledgeably. So I'd like to take Anders Zorn's palette today and add a color. I thought about adding two colors, but as I was pre-mixing all my colors, I realized you end up with hundreds of different colors. The more color primary colors you add to his palette, you end up getting into loads and loads of different colors. And I like to pre-mix my colors a little bit, especially when I'm doing these live streams, so that you're not watching me mix paint all the time. Now, if you happen to watch Stefan's last live stream, he was playing with color in a portrait that he did, and he put some very crazy colors and very bizarre colors in. But when you looked at the same image in black and white, it looked right. So this is proof of what we're saying here. If the value is right, you can get away with almost any color at all. But ideally, maybe it's a combination of both. So maybe you have a good value structure and you have some colors that are working together. So there's some harmony and so on in them, and they work well together. Okay, I'm just going to pull up this. I'm going to bring up this image right here. This is something that I did a long time ago. It's just like a little study. And I'm just getting rid of this thing from Facebook. It keeps popping up. Hopefully you guys can still hear me and see me. Okay. This was just a little pumpkin that I did. And this little pumpkin here is made with Anders Zorn's palette. And you can see what I've got on this side over here. I've got my white, I've got my yellow ochre, my cadmium red, and my ivory black. And at the bottom of this image right here, you'll notice that, or this painting, you'll notice that I've played a little bit with colors to see what kinds of colors I can get out of that very limited palette. So I've got ivory black and yellow ochre here, which gives me a green, because the ivory black has quite a bit of blue in it. It creates a green, but it's not a very pretty green. It's like a gray green. But it really is a green because of the blue that happens in the ivory black. This here is just the straight ivory black with white added in, so I'm getting grays here. This is just the yellow ochre, and I've added white into the yellow ochre, and I get two ranges of, a darker yellow ochre and a lighter one. So when you add white into a color, it cools it a little bit, it lightens it and cools it. This is just the cadmium red, and of course I lightened it and cooled it and ended up with a pink. So it's no longer red, it becomes pink. And this is the violet that you get, or a purple, from the limited range that you get from cadmium red and ivory black with white in it. Because of the blue in the black and the red here, you get this violet, which is okay. It's not, it is a violet, and it's not bad considering it's made with cadmium red and ivory black. But we can create much more vibrant violets if we work with blues. I've actually pre-mixed some colors. I'll come back to that here. Let me just do this. I'm going to come back here and just solo layout. Here we go. So you can see in the background here a whole bunch of pre-mixed colors, and I've just kind of built scales of colors here so that you can see the range that I'm working with. You can't see all of them. I've got some down below here that are in the yellow range. But basically I've taken a red and I brought it down in value with black. And of course that takes it slightly towards the violet, but it's just a darker red. And then I've lightened it, which has given me a pink right here. I've taken I've actually tried to create some flesh colors here, which means that I had to bring a little bit of yellow ochre to create a range of flesh colors here. So I've got cadmium red, yellow ochre, and white to give me that range of flesh colors right there. So you can do some really beautiful flesh colors using this palette. This here is just a straight black, the ivory black, and I've taken it into a dark gray and brought it up into a light gray. And so that's a cooler gray that you see right there. And so this is the blue that I'm going to introduce today. It's not one of Stefan's favorite colors, but it's one of mine. Maybe that's why I'm doing that. This is a manganese blue, and it's an Old Holland. It's a beautiful color. It's in the phthalo family, so cerulean blue, manganese blue, phthalo. It's in the same family, so you get a lot of similar blues out of that range. And then below that, I think you can barely see this. I've mixed some cooler grays, adding a little bit of the manganese into that. Now it's interesting. Manganese, for me, it's a warm blue. So, but it doesn't mean that it's not a cooler gray. So this is something that sort of is mind-bending, because when you add blue into with white, you end up with a lighter, cooler color, even if it's a warm blue to begin with. So that's just something to think about, because color is always relative. I like to look at it like a piano keyboard. You have your high keys, you have your low keys, and you have a similar sound, but it's in a different relationship to all the other sounds around it. And on that note of keys, this idea of keys, if you mix your colors ahead of time, as I'm trying to do more these days, you'll see if there's harmony or not. There's nothing worse, and I play piano a little bit, so there's nothing worse than sitting down to a piano and it's out of tune. Or maybe it's even just 2 or 3 notes that are not in tune. The relationship is wrong, and it's very disconcerting, and it doesn't sound good. It's disturbing, and like when I'm playing a piano like that, I try and avoid those keys because they don't sound good together. Well, it's the same thing with color. If you have color on your painting that is out of relationship with the other colors there, it can be disturbing. Sometimes you can do it on purpose, and I've seen artists who do that quite effectively, where everything's in harmony, and they'll take one color that is out of harmony with the other colors, and that's just an interesting thing to play with. You can do that. It's sort of like a funny note on a saxophone or something, but for the most part, we intuitively understand when colors are working well together. So having good harmony in your colors and working that out ahead of time can really make a difference to your painting to keep things fresh and clean. You can probably just barely see an image up top here, and it's a photograph of a guy who was sitting outdoors when I was doing a plein air course in Vienna, and we were sitting at the Rathaus, the city hall in Vienna, and this gentleman was sitting at another table, and I just thought he had a very interesting face. He was smoking, and I had a good chat with him. He was an artist as well, and it just happened to be there. And sometimes you're out and you see someone interesting, and I like to get their permission to take their photo. I don't always do that, but if it's someone I think would make a really great portrait, I like to get their permission to have their photograph. So I'm going to attempt to paint him today. If it looks like him, it'll be a miracle. If it looks like someone, like one of his relatives, I'll be happy. I'm really more interested in playing with the colors today, and so we'll get that going. I'll take this little pumpkin thing away, and I'll go through the process and try and explain what it is I'm doing. Nice to see you, Petra. I see you, Rita, Ganina, Jeanette. This is great. I'm glad you guys are connecting again here today. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. All right. I'm going to go to this here and pull this over here. And it looks like I need to straighten something. Just take a second here. Setting up is always the challenge here because things just shift a little. And it's best to do. You're getting dizzy watching this. My apologies. It was all in place, but something moved. Okay. Hi, Stilio. Great to see you. Come in just as I'm adjusting everything. All right. All right. You try to play free jazz with your brush and colors. That's brilliant. I love it. It's great just to play with your colors. It's just great. Okay. The first thing I'm going to do is just put some kind of color down here. I'm wondering if this might be a better view. Okay, maybe this is a better view. You can watch what I'm doing. Maybe I'll switch sides up here so that feels a little bit better. Okay, you'll be able to see me using some of these colors here, and you'll be able to watch this as well. Hopefully this works okay. I just want to put some kind of color down just to get some color going here. I like to have something down because I don't like painting into straight white canvas typically, and it also creates a harmonization because when you put a color down, the colors you put on top, of course, are tempered by the color that's down there already. So a little bit of the color that's down there already finds its way into the colors that you put on top, and it's just a nice way to start. So I think maybe I'll start with a flesh color. And see how that goes. All I'm using is a bit of linseed oil and a bit of chaise oil, as Stefan calls it, or thinner. And I'm going to put down, let's see, let's put down a color like this one here. And let's just see how this goes. And you can see this is quite wet. Uh, I'm just going to put something down, get this going. Overall, not even worrying about the drawing at this stage. Maybe just to make it a little more interesting, I'll get a couple of darker areas through here. And I want to try and find the image in this, if that makes any sense. I'm just going to try and find an image that works. And I'm going to stick somewhat to the Anders Zorn palette initially. That's what I'm going to do. And then what I'll do is I'll add in some of the blues and the greens that come out of that palette when I add in the manganese blue in that range. So you can see this is quite runny. Just going to soften that off a little. There we go. It's pretty wet, so I might actually have to take a little bit of the oil out of that. I think what I'll do, I need to put a little more substance into the paint because right now all it is just running all over the place. I'm just going to take some paper towel, get rid of some of that oil. You can see it just leaves a stain of the color. That's okay. A little less exciting. I kind of like it when it's just running down all over the place because that looks kind of abstract, which is fun. All right. Now I'll bring a little bit more of this color in, just a little heavier color, a little drier. You can see there's less oil in that. And I'm just going to put some color in different places just to give me a beginning of something. All I want to do is get something down so that I've got a shape to work into. The hand has some darker areas here. All right. I'm going to keep checking in on you guys. I'm hoping that we won't lose our signal again today. That seems to be something consistent that's been happening recently. So I don't want that to happen. I want to get my values working kind of in the face, and I'll go back and bring more detail into it where I need to. I want to get proportions working here. There's an interesting beard and an interesting color that works in his jacket that he's wearing, which is a red. I'm going to even bring a little bit of that in just to give me a sense of where that might be. So there's a red jacket going in here somehow. And see it coming up towards his hand. And at this stage, all I'm doing is trying to look for general color areas. And this is a very different approach. You know, it's not like, when I say very different, it's something that I like to do because it's not specific. I know Stefan does this too. You know, when we were painting together, I was always fascinated how he could take, you know, loose color and throw it down, and then suddenly magically, you know, the shape of what he was trying to paint starts to appear. I'm going to put a dark shape up in here for this guy's hat. He's wearing a pretty cool hat. He had a lot of hair underneath this hat. So this is just like a almost black, but it's not. I've got a little bit of cad red in it. So I'm just going to try and draw with my brush a little here, keeping things simple and just imitating the shapes that I see. Try and keep my drawing, you know, loose and accurate at the same time. I know that sounds ridiculous, but in a sense, I want to make sure that when I'm painting, I don't want to put shapes all over in the wrong place to begin with, because then I have to correct a lot more. I can take paint away because it's wet. So I've just dipped my paint into thinner now. And one of the important elements in this painting is his beard. So I'm just going to take color away here and just use the brush to do that. I could use a rag or something else if I wanted to. I could take another smaller brush and use that if I wanted. But it's just to give me a sense of where the values are. There's a little highlight on his nose here. I'm taking paint away here at the moment. And this is kind of working in reverse. You you know, I like to work from dark to light typically, but I'll go back into this with some color and hopefully that will make sense. I'm trying to get the rhythm and the flow of this painting. And the negative shapes behind him are going to be important as well. So if the negative shapes are working, then the positive shapes are going to work well too. So I'm going to just go in and refine this hat here a little more. It's a big hat that he was wearing. All right. I think what I want to do now is go into the background, and I'm going to use just a slightly lighter gray in the background and just indicate where I see his forehead and the shape, the larger shapes of his face. And here's where I want to be a little bit more accurate, but not crazy accurate. And I can see that, you know, his finger comes up over here. It's just a little lower than his nose. Now you can't see the image that I'm working from, I don't think. No, you can't right now. But you had a little sneak peek of that earlier. It's a bit of darkness in here. And really what I'm trying to do is paint shapes. That's something I can't stress too much. I'm looking for big shapes to try and get things working. And you can see the face is starting to evolve out of this already. Hopefully you can see that. And that whole background area is a little dark. And I'll deal with a little more of that background later, because that's where I'll use some of the other colors that I have from the manganese. I'll work those up. And again, I'm just going to keep that soft and loose. Just get a feeling for what's going on here. He is sort of slumped over a little bit, so his shoulder's a little high. Right there. Just going to throw that in. All right, and again, cleaning the brush regularly. When I do that, of course, there's lots of paint thinner in that, so I have to make sure that I take a lot of that thinner out if I want to have more control and less of the runny stuff that you see that's going on right here. Okay, now let me just go into this red again and just define where that collar comes down here. I like just, again, getting the big groups of colors going. And if it looks like this guy when I'm done, bonus. But if it doesn't and it turns into a painting that I like, I'm happy with that. Just, you know, so you know, you don't have to get everything exact when you start. I've gone into a little darker red here. I'm going to bring in a combination of a dark red and a bit of the ivory black into this area, so I have this area defined a little more. All right, that seems to be okay. Now I'm going to take a smaller brush now and start to work a few details up to try and get these shapes in place. I have a dry brush right now, so with this dry brush I can start to take a little bit of paint away. I can, you know, play with the shapes that I see. I can push color around, so I can push this color that I see in his beard up a little higher, and it's a little drier, this paint now. It's already dried a little bit, so it's not runny like it was before. You can get a lot more control this way when it's a little drier, because it's not all running down. Of course, the thicker the paint you put in, the more you can control that paint. It sounds kind of, again, kind of counterintuitive. A lot of us are afraid to put paint down. Don't be afraid to put paint down. I mean, that's what we're doing here. We're painting, right? So you can always keep moving it until it's right, until it looks right. Always drawing and looking at the shapes that are making up the face. I'm going to put the eye socket in here. And I can go back in and get a little more detail into that later when I need to. Right now, I just want to get those big shapes working. That forces you to keep drawing all the way through. Okay. And I don't want to forget about his hand down here. So I've got an area that comes away from his mouth in here. And I'm just going to draw with the side of the brush here so I have a sense of where those fingers are. Okay, and the back of his hand gets a little darker over there too for some reason. Trust what you see in your image, in your photo. Trust that it's telling you something you need to know in order to make the image look right. Now I see some grays that are happening, actually warmer grays that are happening in right near his mouth, right in this area here, and his beard. And a little bit of detail right in here where his mouth is. I want to get a sense of where his features are, so I'm just going to put in a little bit of a nostril there, and I also want to put in his eye right in here. And you can see how that just sort of gives me a map that I can follow. Hi Moni, nice to see you all the way from Germany. So great you guys are checking in on this. I really appreciate that you're watching, and I'm hoping that you're learning some things from what I'm showing you. There's so much to learn. There's no end of the things that you can learn, really, truly. So, I mean, I learn every time I do these things also. Every time you do a painting, it teaches you something. That's something to be thinking about when you're painting. There's no such thing as really a failure, because everything that you do teaches you something. Hopefully. We learn our lessons, we learn how to do something better. You go back and do it again and do it better the next time from the lessons you've learned. All right. Thanks, Jeanette. Yeah, I'm having some fun doing this. Okay, gonna take a little bit of light out here that I see where his upper lid is. He has some nice expression that I'd kind of like to get up in here. Just the raising of his eyebrow. Sometimes, I look at paintings at this stage and I'm excited about it because I think, well, okay, this is really interesting. What do I need to put in to make it work? How much do I need to put in to make it work? Can I put in less? That's always a really good question. Can you put in less to make it work? And what do I need to take out? So a lot of what we end up doing as painters, if you happen to watch Stefan and I can't remember if he was publishing it today or when it was exactly, but we had a little interview, he and I together, and just to talk about what inspires you, what gets you going as an artist, and what are the things that kind of get you excited about painting. How do you organize yourself before you're painting, before you do anything? And for me, it's kind of a combination of looking at the images and working on the colors and so on ahead of time, or thinking about them and the composition, being inspired by other artists also. Um, I'm hoping that you'll check in on this interview that Stefan and I did. And again, we talk fairly extensively. It's about 80 minutes or something like that, about these subjects, because it's one thing to learn how to paint and the technical side, but then it's the other thing is, well, what do you paint and why are you painting what you paint? So what is the meaning of the painting that we do? What are the subjects that are interesting to you? I find people fascinating, but I also find places fascinating. Here we go. Okay, I cut out for a moment there. So sorry. My phone does this regularly. I'm hoping that you can still hear me. Please let me know if you can't hear me. Um, and sorry for the interruptions. This is a technical thing that unfortunately is happening, as far as I can tell, because of the internet here. It's not great. Um, it's very unstable. Uh, maybe it's okay if it cuts out because it gives you a break from listening to me. I'm going to give this guy a really nice long beard. Okay. Okay. Okay, that's great, Jenna. Thank you. When I do cut out like that, I seem to be able to sign in quickly enough and get back. So all is not lost, but it's very frustrating. Okay, so at this stage right now, I've sort of pulled away the paint in the light areas, uh, where and got some, a good part of the drawing sorted out here. And now I can start to go in with a little more opaque color. And now, if you look at Anders Zorn's paintings, like they're just full of rich, like every brushstroke seems like it's perfect. He gets a lot of paint on his brush, and he just like puts it in with one big bold brushstroke. He makes it look so easy. Um, it's really incredible to see, these old masters, these guys who really knew what they were doing, working, or the way they worked, to look at their brushwork, because every one of these paintings that you look at done by these great old painters, men and women, um, they are leaving sort of a story. They're leaving evidence of how they used to work, and you can really see it in their work if you look for it. Those big bold brushstrokes. Very often, those big bold brushstrokes are covering a lot of smaller ones that are just exploration strokes. So, we're seeing the end result. It's one of the reasons why I really like looking at studies by the old masters, the incompleted works, because the incompleted works kind of give you an idea as to how they went through a process to get the images they did. Particularly, it's interesting to look at Degas' work, because there are a few, they call them unfinished, um, and it's just like, unfinished. What is unfinished? Well, maybe it was just a study, or maybe it's one that wasn't completed, or maybe that's just as far as the artist wanted to go with it. So who's to say what is unfinished and what isn't? Sometimes the artist was just practicing. I'm quite convinced that Rembrandt was a guy who practiced. A lot of his self portraits were practice portraits, so that he could work things out, different techniques, different ways of putting color down. And when you work doing studies, because you're not trying to create the masterpiece, sometimes you end up with something that's far more interesting than the masterpiece, as we like to think. What is a masterpiece anyhow? Um, maybe maybe just some of the studies are masterpieces. Who's to say? All right. It's quite dark up in this part of the image. You're getting some reflection there, unfortunately, because of the way my lighting works. But at least you have an idea, hopefully, in the main section here. All right. Okay. Now I'm going to start to bring a little more opaque paint in, a little more detail. And this guy's holding a cigarette, which is really, it's a focal point. I need to move his mouth just a touch higher to make this work, I think. So I'm going to bring a little bit of dark up just a little higher here. And then I want to take out some paint where the cigarette is, which is right in here, right there. And I'm going to make the cigarette just a little longer than it really is in the photo that I have, because I want that negative shape to look interesting. Who says that the cigarette has to be the same size that's in the photo? Just make it a little longer. That's okay. Exaggerate. And because that's the focal point, you know, this is an area I want to be a little more careful with. Keep it clean. This is where I'm going to bring in I'll bring in a Q-tip to take away the paint right there, just so it's nice and clean. I'll go back and paint over that again with white or something that's close to white. This is a nice way to get this little detail in the right spot. Every time I go back, I pull more paint in. There we go. All right. We'll define that a little better later, but that's kind of the focal area. Okay. Now I'm just going to play with this area a little bit. There's another little point where there's a light that comes off the finger that's in front of the cigarette, but I'm going to start to, so let's just do this here. There's a little highlight that comes in here underneath the nose. Again, I'm looking at shapes. I want to paint the shapes that I see. I'm going to go in with a smaller brush now again, slightly smaller. Let's just do this first before I do. It's funny how one little brush stroke can change an expression so quickly. There we go. And I want to paint that little finger in with some good flesh color. Now I'm going into more opaque color. And hopefully this is going to make more sense once I do this. There's a finger that comes in here. That may be a little too dark, so I'm going to go to a slightly lighter pre-mixed color that I have. And just put that in place. And behind is another finger here. And there's a bit of red that goes into the end of that finger and the nail. This is something I always love looking at Sargent's paintings, because you'll notice that he puts a little bit of hit of color at the end of the fingers, and it just makes them feel a little more believable. Not like nail polish, but just, you know, something that adds a little more color and a little more interest. And he definitely exaggerated fingers when he painted them. So we'll just get some of that working there. I'm going to go into a little lighter color for these fingers here. Just paint it out and go, you know, you can go back in and correct. Every time there's a plane change, there's a color change and a value change. That's just something to think about. So be aware that every time you paint, you know, fingers or faces or hands, every time there's a change in plane, a change in direction, you don't see it as much in the shadows, of course, but you do see it in the light. So, you know, I can paint a color in and then go back in on another plane and just change the color ever so slightly so that we recognize there's a turn in the form. It's really important to get that working properly. And as I've painted this out, I realized that my dark area here has to come a little higher. So as you're painting, always be correcting your drawing. That's something you have to watch for all the time. Drawing is probably one of the things that I see in most artists' work, including my own. We struggle to keep that, working, because we get so into painting something and trying to make it look like something, we forget, well, actually, we need to keep drawing it, otherwise it doesn't look right. All right. Okay, I want to get into his face a little more here, but before I do that, I'm just going to go back and resolve this finger back here a little more. And maybe I'm going to go even into a little highlight here and here. We'll deal with these things in a little more detail later. We have the time. Sometimes I only take these things so far, and then I need to take a little more time, be a little more careful to get the details working properly in my own studio time. Okay. As the fingers come back this way, there's some nice folds that happen over here. This is really rough, but it's giving me the idea of where I have to go. I can see in reality, I don't see as much of that finger because of the beard, so I can just pull that away. All right. Let's get a little bit of color, flesh color going in his face now. Up to the nose. You can see how some of the color underneath kind of picks up a bit there, which is nice. I like when that happens. Now I'm going down into the yellow ochre color that I have here, because I see, now this is yellow ochre and white, so it's a little bit cooler and it changes color and form right here, so I need to make sure that, I've got colors that are helping this form turn, and values has to work that way. I'm going to go into this area here in his beard, his mustache. Let's get that working. And I see some pinks and things that are happening up here in his cheek. I don't want to get too fussy with my color here. Just want to try and keep the forms working as much as possible. All right. Okay. I see a nice light color that comes across up here near his forehead. And you see I'm trying to keep true to the values that I established, even in pulling color away. So if I can do that, it gives me, it makes it all more believable. As far as the values are concerned, it's really important. Get those things working, keeping your color simple, just chunk it in, We can resolve lots of things later, but again, always drawing with your brush. Be cognizant, be watching to draw with your brush as much as you can while you go, so that it looks right value-wise. Also, your edges and your valley should be working. I'm going to put a little more of that red in there, just a little more concentration of the color. His collar comes down this way, like so. And I'm going to go to kind of this pinky color here. It was in his face somewhat, but this is a little bit brighter, this pink right here. It's cool light, by the way. So it was a cool lit subject, which means my lights are going to be cooler and my shadows are going to be warmer. If it's cool light, you have warm shadow. You have cool light, you have warm shadow, warm light, cool shadow. That's something always to be keeping in mind. I'm going to go back and really chunk some cooler, even though this is a red. I've added white into it, which cools it down, but I don't want it to look like it's pink. The other colors around it should support the fact that it's not pink. So we'll see if that actually works. Okay, I can go into my darker reds now, which basically have black in them. So that's one thing about working with this palette. You can bring black into red, and it does a pretty nice job of reducing the value and still retaining the original color idea. So you take cadmium red and put black into it. This is an area where you can really use black and it works. I'm going to go with an even darker color in that red down in here, just so we feel the form turning, and maybe a little bit of a detail through this jacket here. Maybe that was a little too much. Don't know. We'll see. Always leaving room to correct things later. It's quite okay. I want to get a sense of where his neck comes up here. It's very dark right here against his beard. I'm going to go back into this area here. And, you know, this is not really important stuff. When I say that, everything's important, but some stuff is just supporting the detail areas. That's all it's doing. So if I have red in an area down here, I want to try and bring a little bit of color into the reds and pinks into the areas that are up here so that there's a relationship of these colors together. I'm going to put a little more pink in his fingers. I'm going to go into this pink and put a little bit more into his cheek in this area, and maybe in the edge of his nose, a little bit on the tip of his nose. And that just brings a little more believability. I mean, we do look that way. We have more color in the areas that are closer, where the bone is closer to the surface and where the blood is closer to the surface. So your elbows, the tip of your nose, your cheeks and so on, they have more color in them. So more chroma, more intense color. So that's just something to be thinking about when you're painting. I'm going to bring a little more color even in here. There's a little darker red color in this area here. Go in underneath the eyebrow and just pull up a little more shadow and value changes. Go into this section here and try and bring some form. This is where it's really fun, because you can keep playing with these areas as long as you don't make it muddy and mucky. You can keep playing with these areas until they have the form that you like. I'm going to go onto the edge of his nose here, the top of his nose. Just let that build up. I see there's a little more color that comes across his nose here as well. Maybe even a little more color just at the edge of the eye, right here. And I want to correct the form in his eye a little more here. I'm getting a little bit more into detail than I really want to even at this stage. I could keep this a little simpler, but like everyone, I get into details too fast sometimes. I shouldn't say like everyone. Some people are able to hold themselves back from all the exciting brushwork and stuff. Okay, you're all quiet, listening and watching. Great, this is good. Thank you. I appreciate the reassurance, knowing you're there. Okay, I'm going to start bringing some color into his beard now. And a little more form into these areas. Now I've gone in with, this is a gray. This is a cool gray because it's uh, a cool color scheme light-wise. And where it goes into shadow, I can go a little bit warmer. So I can actually bring in, some of these kinds of colors. Cool light, warm shadow. So I'm going to go into grays that have more ochre. And again, yellow ochre is a cool yellow, by the way, in case you didn't know. If you've listened to me before, you'll hear me go on about this stuff. But if you want to know why, if you had to paint like a sunset or candlelight, you wouldn't use yellow ochre. You'll use cadmium yellow, and so yellow ochre is actually a cooler yellow. And this is something I actually learned from Richard Schmidt, if you know who he is, in his color palette. I did some research, and he uses yellow ochre as a cool yellow. So that's just something to think about. Goes into shadow here. But I want to get that cool light that comes into this area here too. Just wherever the light is picking up, I can go in with that cooler gray and make that work. Now, right now, it doesn't look much like a beard. It looks like just a clumpy, a clumpy thing. So I want to try and loosen the edges up a little bit so that it feels more like a beard, because beards are a little looser in texture than this. So I can go in, and I'm sort of, at this point, taking color away again, but just loosening the edges so it has a little more flow. I don't mind if I pick up a little bit of another color in here. Again, as long as the values are right, it's going to work. Okay, so that's just something to think about. I just want that to flow a little more. When you're painting things like this, try and get the sensation or the feeling. Let your brush follow the form so that you have a flow to it. With grays, I think one of the guys who was amazing at whites and grays was Sorolla. If you look at Sorolla's paintings, he has so much color going in his whites. And you can really put a lot of color into whites. Lots of different colors, and make it work. Now, up until now, I have not used any of the manganese blue, which I'd set out to do, right? So I'm going to start to introduce that. Let me just do a little bit more in this area down in here to complete the hand. A little more in this zone. I haven't used that manganese much, not at all actually yet. And I want to show you what happens when you do that, because you'll see a punch of color in this that it's not in quite the same harmony, because I'm introducing another color. But I can get greens out of the manganese that I can't get out of yellow ochre, and I can't get out of ivory, black, and yellow ochre. Give you they're not great greens, honestly. So if you look at Zorn's work, you'll find there are times when he used another color in order to get his greens. There's just no way he could have got his greens just using yellow ochre and ivory black. It wouldn't work. So that's something that is worth looking at. If you see an artist's work and you wonder, how did they do that? look at their colors carefully and see if you can figure out, what are those colors? How could he have only used such a limited palette to make that work? Like, it just doesn't make sense. And if you study these guys, you'll find out that, yeah, for the most part, they went with certain palettes and a certain feel to things. But in the end, they'll use any colors that are going to make the painting better. That's the idea. You want to have a good painting, right? So I'm just bringing a little more chrome in here. All right. Just softening things down, getting the form to work. Okay. All right. Yeah, the red jacket and the beard. It's a good idea, too. There might be a little bit of that reflection in the beard. Let's see what that looks like. It's a good idea. See what happens if I do that. Yeah, that helps to bring the relationship of these two together. Yeah, it would be nice if you could see what I'm working from. Let me just see. I'm going to try this. See if you can actually see. Okay. Up here, you can barely see it in the corner. This is the image that I'm working from. I don't know. Maybe if I bring it over this way, you can see a little better. That's the image I'm working from. It's on my iPad. So it's I'm not absolutely trying to copy it exactly, but you can kind of see between the two images there, you can kind of get the feeling of what's there. If I was trying to do a portrait, like a real portrait, I'd probably take a little more time to try and get the features more accurate. But for this demonstration, it's not really about portraiture so much as it is about trying to work with the Zorn palette and add another color to it. Okay, I'm going to get just a little more of his jacket going here, and then let's get on with the adding the manganese, which is really fun because it's a color that just adds a little more punch to the program. Okay. All right. It's a lot of red in there. It's starting to look like Santa Claus. Okay. Now, the background in the image that I have actually has some pretty neat greens. If I was trying to use a green from the Zorn palette, it's very limited. It's kind of like a gray. It's like a gray with yellow in it. In fact, I'll show you what kind of green it is. I'll just put some of the green in. This is the kind of green you would get from, oh, let me just make that bigger so you can see properly. That's the kind of green you would get. This here, it's more like really like an ochre with ivory black. And it's very limited, really. But if I use manganese, it has a lot more blue in it, and I get these kinds of greens. So I get that kind of green, which is a little more exciting. Like I find, yes, that harmonizes well with what's going on here, but this green here has more energy, more life to it. And in behind him was just a tree of some kind. I'm going to go in with the greens that I made up ahead of time using manganese and so which is the blue, right? So it has the blue in it that ivory black doesn't have in it. And you can create some nice lively, but not too lively greens, because when you work with yellow ochre and manganese, the yellow ochre cools it down. Manganese is quite a warm blue. The yellow ochre cools it down a little bit. And it does still harmonize because there's yellow ochre in it. And there's so much yellow ochre going on in the rest of this painting here. So in that respect, there's harmony and it works. If I were going into straight manganese, and I can do that, you can see manganese is not one of the strongest colors out there, but you can see when I do this, and I'm going to bring that manganese in close to the cigarette because that's a focal area right there. Why not bring a little more chroma into that area, and maybe the straight manganese with even a bit of blue. So when I say, sorry, with a bit of white, to make it a blue that stands out a little more. You can do that, and it keeps a nice feel of color harmony still with the rest of the painting because I don't have too much of that. Okay, just going to do this here. Hang on, that's what I want to do. I'll just switch it up. There we go. So you can see those colors a little better. All right, going back into those greens. And of course, greens up against the reds, we've got our complement colors. As soon as you have those complement colors going on in a painting, greens and reds together, you have a lot more excitement. It's a lot more interesting. I'm going to go into a darker, I'm going to actually bring some ivory black into the manganese, and that's going to give me a bluer, richer shadow area in behind the black of his hat, which is something kind of fun. Some of these things I kind of do on the fly. You know, it's a bit intuitive because I can kind of picture it ahead of time. If you're a musician, if you've been playing for a while, before you hit a note, you anticipate what it might sound like. When you're painting, the same thing can happen. When you've painted quite a bit, you have a sense of what the colors might, how they might work together. And it's really fun because you can play a little more that way without being sort of held down by rules all the time. Okay, I'm going to even bring a little bit of that blue into areas that are a little bit dull down here. So the blue and the red together are kind of creating a sense of violet in this area. And that's a bit more exciting. Okay. All right. Now, this is where I want to get just a little bit more careful and a little more finesse in a couple of detail areas so that they fit properly. Into the scheme of things. Can soften edges where I need to. You know, this is a point where you can go back and just soften edges off where they're not important. You know, the back of his hat is really not very important. We want to know he's wearing a hat, but it's not an important area. I can also do that with a jacket. Just soften things down. I just want to get a feeling of what's going on. The areas that are furthest from the focal area, which is here, can afford to be softer. You know, you don't have to put everything in detail. I know I go on about that a lot, but that's the truth. I'm going to go back down into these areas here. And again, this is a study, you know, I'm just playing here so that we're getting a sense, a feeling of how this palette might work. And I know this is a way of quickly getting muddy color if you're not careful. I can always go back in with fresh color on top of this where I need to. I want to get my accents working, the dark areas that have to work properly. I can see a bit of his neck down here. Maybe it needs to be a bit lighter. Comes up into the light. And I've got lots of color, fresh color to work with here, so that's not an issue. That's the nice thing about pre-mixing your colors ahead of time. You have lots of fresh color on hand. Now, he doesn't have a blue shirt on, but I'm going to try this. I'm just curious to see if this will work. I'm going to give him a blue shirt. It's coming from the manganese. And I can just pop a little more chroma in here. Makes it a little more exciting. Again, that's the manganese that I'm working with. As it goes into shadow in here, I can do that. Maybe that's too disturbing. I don't know. You know, I'm just playing. This is just having fun right now. I'm not trying to get too fancy with things. That's maybe getting a little too much attention. I don't know. Well, that's something I can decide on later. I can always knock it back if I need to. I can always get rid of color. Getting rid of color is easy enough to do. You just have to go over it with other colors. That's all. Okay. Now, his finger is in the wrong place. I need to actually have it come more from this side here. I get my drawing working a little better. So that finger is coming out this way, all the way over to there, and get that negative shape in behind here working better. This is where drawing is really critical. I'm going to put the tip of his finger there, and here too, and pick up his knuckle here. Make sure that that finger drops down through there properly. There's a bit of an exaggeration here. Looks a little bit like a cartoon or a caricature. I just want to really get the cigarette working now. So I'm going to just go in here, soften that edge, and let's get a little bit of gray underneath the cigarette. But when I put in a gray, I want to put in just a touch of color. I'm even going to use a tiny bit of green in underneath this cigarette right here. And for the cigarette itself, I'm going to put in just a bit of white. Let's see if I can put this in carefully. Okay, that's okay. I just used a palette knife to put in a pure white, which is something I don't usually use in a painting. But in a case like this, where I'm trying to create a little contrast, a little focal area, and maybe there's even a hint of red in that cigarette. I don't know. But what I do know is that if you're smoking the cigarette, one of the things that happens is you get smoke coming away from it. So it's not showing in my photograph, but I'm going to show it in the painting and just see what that looks like. So I'm going to start up here, just turning the brush, and let that cigarette smoke find its way up. Okay, it's okay, it's not bad. All right, I'm just going to go in now with his red jacket with a little more definition in some shapes with a palette knife. It's always nice to change up your the tool you're using to get more interest, more excitement in your work. Because if everything is just brushwork all the time, I find it gets a little bit monotonous unless you're, amazing with a brush and it's just super exciting. I find that the palette knife leaves more natural shapes somehow or other. Also going to do that a bit in the background. Go in with some darks in the background. Keep it fresh, keep it crisp, keep it interesting. And I'm going to grab a little more of that blue, throw that in behind. I do like the marks that palette knives make. I just find it's because it's so different than the brush, they kind of add a whole different dimension, a whole different kind of excitement to your work. It just breaks things up a little bit. And now I want to take my big brush So, Sasha, is it really fuzzy? Is that what's happening? Painting camera's close to 5 frames per second, so it's very staggered. Does that mean it's showing really soft for you? It's not. It's okay. I'm hoping you guys can hear me again. It looks like Sasha, the frame rate was really slow. So I'm hoping I'm back again. Can you hear me? I'm hoping this is working again. I'm very sorry about this. I really find this frustrating. Um, Let me know if you can hear me. I will post this again. We're at 317 now, and maybe because it's just really, it's not working very well, I'll just work a little more on this and post it. Sound is still good. Let's see if it's working again. Okay. Okay, Ina, you've got a thumbs up. It's really, really inconsistent, my signal here. I'm going to have to resolve this more permanently. I've actually been online with the provider for hours to try and resolve these issues, and not very happy. This is Bell Canada, and if anyone's listening who knows Bell Canada, I'm not very happy with them, and that will go for a lot of people here in Canada who have them as service providers. So there's my advertising for Bell Canada. Get your act together. I'm supposed to be getting 1.5 gig service here, and so I'm not getting the kind of service I would expect. This is supposed to be a premium service. These big companies, they don't have too much time to work it out with you, it seems. So it comes and goes. Sometimes it's really good, and other times it's just really not good at all. So, okay, I'm putting my darks. Remember we talked about focal areas in one of the past sessions? I'm putting my darks and my lights in the same area. That gives you a natural focal area. So as I get closer to the cigarette here, I can make my edges a little more crisp. Okay, I'm happy that you're able to see this okay, Anne. I'm hoping everyone can. All right, I'm just going to put a little darkness above the cigarette right here. I may have to go back into this later just to get a little more definition, but your eye should start to come towards this area right here, really. And I can even put a little bit of dark in on this side here. This guy was wearing a whole bunch of rings, which I'm leaving out. I'm not putting them in because they're just confusing. I'm going to go in with a very fine brush right now and just pick up a couple of little... Whoops, oh boy. I just put a paintbrush stroke on my camera. Well, maybe that helps. Okay. I've got my camera between me and the painting, my iPhone. So it's moving around. You'll know why. Because I just tried to put a brush stroke on it. Okay. All right. And yes, I'm still painting on oil primed underground or ground. I like it because I can take it away when I need to. It's easy to do that. It's slippery. It gives me a nice surface to work with. And there's a board that I've painted over with an oil ground. I find for some reason the acrylic is less receptive to moving it later. So that's one of the things that I like to be able to do, is to be able to move the color around for a little while until I'm happy with it. I will post a higher res image of this so that you guys can see this better. With a very fine brush now, I can start to bring just a tiny bit of detail in. And again, I don't want to get too detailed in this. At this stage, I could go for like several hours if I wanted to, just to bring more stuff in. But let me just do a few things here. It's way too dark. Just with this brush here. And this is the kind of thing that I can fiddle with and fool with until it doesn't look good anymore. So you have to watch you don't do too much of this fussy stuff. A little bit of detail is good, but try and keep your shapes simple and bold. Try and keep the freshness if you can in your work. It's those big shapes that we look at, really, in the end. I mean, I can do this sort of thing, soften his beard down. You've got a finer brush, you can do that sort of thing. And I'll bring some of that out even over his hand, because in the image, in the original, it does that. So it comes all the way out here. I'm exaggerating now. This is a fun little brush. I like this brush because it comes to a really fine point, but I can also use it in a broader way. It's like a dagger brush. Okay. I'm going to do one last thing before I call it here. I'm just going to put in a couple of pure white highlights. And it's not something I do very often, but in this case, because his beard is so spectacular, and there's some white also in the cigarette, I think I can put a little bit of white right in here just to pull it up a little more into that last highlight, that last high value. And it should work. If it doesn't, I'll just take it out later with a palette knife. I like when you get these sort of random globs, these things that happen that, you know, kind of, again, I don't want to get too fussy with it. I want to get the feeling of it. All right. So I think I'm going to call it. Cigarette doesn't come into his mouth. Oh boy. Yeah, I guess I should put a cigarette in his mouth. That's a good idea. Let's just see if I can do that. Thanks for pointing that out. Let me just pop a little bit of a gray in here. There's a bit of gray, and it's actually, usually there's like a bit of a yellow, like a filter, although he probably wasn't smoking filtered cigarettes as I recall, but it's in the dark there. I'm even going to put a bit of color in his lip there. Probably wouldn't hurt either. Right in under here. And a little darker value in the upper lip. Maybe that's a little better. All right. Sasha, the oil prime is actually smoother, believe it or not. It's a very slippery surface, but for some reason, it holds the paint well when you put it down. And I like the idea of starting, with transparency and then working over that with something that's a little more opaque, because it gives you the option of having transparent paint and opaque paint in the same areas. When you look through transparent paint, of course, you're getting really pure color because you're looking through the color. The opaque paint, you're looking at the color on the surface more. So one of the advantages with working on the oil prime for me, it's not so much, it's just the ability to continue to move it around longer. For some reason, I don't know why, and maybe it's just me, maybe I'm using it the wrong way, but the acrylic prime for me, it doesn't seem as flexible. I can't move it around as much. So this feels just more comfortable. Maybe it's because it's oil against oil. I really don't know why. I wish I could answer that. I mean, there are some people who may know the technical parts of that. Okay. I'm hoping you guys enjoyed this. I'm going to come, well, let's just do this. Well, you can see me here. This is, just to summarize this, again, the Anders Zorn palette. This is a very limited palette. This is ivory black, titanium white, and I'm using cadmium red and yellow ochre. And then I've added manganese blue to get some of the greens that you're seeing in here. It's a really fun. You can take Anders Zorn's palette and actually add any of the other primary colors. It could have been like a lemon yellow, or it could have been cad yellow light, or it could be cobalt blue or ultramarine blue. Introduce other colors in. Try an alizarin crimson and see what happens with that. It's really fun to take his limited palette and then add a color to it and see what happens with that. See where it goes for you. This is something I've just been experimenting with and playing with, but maybe this will get you going, doing it your way. I'm just going to try and cover the light here. Let me just try. I want to try something here and see if you can see this better if I turn that light off. Okay. So that shows this painting a little differently because there's less reflection in it. So I'm hoping, yeah, even if I just move that away, that gives you a better sense of what this looks like because it's a little darker with less reflection. Thanks so much for showing up today. I really appreciate it. I'm not sure if I'm going to do one next Friday. I have an intensive week in front of me teaching independent studies every day for 3 hours a day. I'll probably be exhausted. If I can come back to you next Friday, I would really like to do that, but it won't be at the same time. So if I'm going to, I'll make an announcement, or I may actually just post another video that I've done in the past and you can watch that. I still have to make up my mind. Just want to thank everybody for showing up. I hope this was good for you. I hope the sound is okay and the picture eventually. And I really appreciate your support and for checking in on me here. Please stay safe. Please, try some of these things. If it looks like fun, give it a try. Love to have your feedback. if any of you have any questions around these things, I'm watching the chat a little bit. And if you have questions around these things, I'm happy to try and answer. I don't have all the answers, that's for sure. But I'm happy to give you my feedback. There's no end of the different things that you can do with paint. There's so many different techniques and ways of working. I do a few different things than other people, and of course you can learn from every painter when you look online, and there's lots of stuff on YouTube. Watch Stefan's his live streams, because there's so much to learn from him. We learned a lot, I think, even from each other when we painted together. I think it's fair to say. So I certainly learned lots from Stefan. So have a great week. Be well. Again, thumbs up if you will. Check out the Toronto Outdoor Art Fair. It's online now. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Send the link to someone else you might be interested in. Or if you want to tag this link on Facebook, I'll post the YouTube link on Facebook. And I do appreciate your support. It means a lot to me. So you know, as a result of these live streams, I've been able to sell several paintings. And some of you who are actually watching know who you are. If you're curious or interested in purchasing a painting, you can always do that. Just email me at andrewjudd@mac.com. I do sell my work, and I've sold several through this. I think I've 8 or 9 paintings so far that I've sold from my demos. So I try and keep my prices reasonable, especially for other artists, because I know we're all working with a budget. So be well, happy painting, and I will see you again soon, maybe next Friday. If not, it'll be the following Friday. Take care and have a great week. Bye-bye.